Good afternoon and welcome to this week 10 of the Hurts and Healing section 2 of Bridging Worlds. A series that I created based on my first book, Friday Bridge. It's my very first book, as I said. And although it was written over 10 years ago, a lot of what is written in there, well, all of what is written in there is still very applicable to what we're seeing in the world today. There will be a link to the book, but today we're going to be looking at racism and how it's been rebranded, why it still exists, how it's the business of it, the psychology, the denial of modern day racism, because people still like to deny that it's there. I have noticed there's an error with the date because today is not the 24th of September, it is the 25th of September. And the reason why I want to make sure that that timestamp is there is so if anything was changed in the last 24 hours, at least now we have the accurate timestamp. So today, let's get cracking on racism rebranded. Now, this is quite an emotive subject for a lot of people, especially those of us who have mixed ethnicity families. Now, there is only one race. Now, we do really need to be quite clear on that. That is the human race. We're all of different ethnicities, though. And this is one of the things where things get a bit confusing for a lot of people, because a lot of people don't know the difference between race, ethnicity, culture, religion, nationality. And, it's getting to a point where it's like, really? Grown adults, intelligent grown adults do not know the difference between those individual things. And it baffles me as to why, especially when you see people speaking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, or equity, diversity, inclusion, depending on which country you're in. And so we need to really look at what it is. It's the business, it's that psychology, because when they use different words, it's a way of them hiding what's actually really going on. And it shows us that if you're not understanding the difference between nationality, culture, ethnicity, religion, and race, then are you really in a position to be advising big corporations on their DEI policies? We're looking at how immigration and government policies are using the word immigration to hide behind really some dark racist behaviors behind the agenda of immigration, and how conscious and unconscious racism actually does matter. I'm going to be talking about how racism works both ways, and some of the causes of racism, and also how the scientific experiment, and this is where I'm talking about scientific racism, how in 1776 the German scientist Johann Friedrich Blumenbach actually put the white people at the top because he was white. There was no other ulterior motive than that. And if you look at experiments with babies who are not racist, they cannot be taught racism, but if you show them that somebody, there's an experiment that was done recently, I say recently, in the last few years, where children, babies and toddlers were given something that they liked food-wise. And even if the person had done a bad thing, the person who liked the thing that they liked, they gravitated towards them, even though they'd done a bad thing. Now, if they had been given something without, if they were then asked to choose the person without the person liking something that they like, they gravitated towards the good person. So there is lots of experiments there, which we're going to be coming on to shortly. So that's an overview of what we're going to be covering today. And so without further ado, let's go on to the definitions. So what is racism? Over the years, what we've seen is we've seen the beatings, we have seen corrupt police forces and governments, and we've seen the outright vile language that people use towards each other, and the violence. And it's when it actually manifests itself when people are treated worse, or they're excluded from jobs, or from communities, or schools, or from opportunities just because they're different. It creates a disadvantage for people into education, or into maybe into sports. It's harassment and bullying, it's humiliation. And these kind of things, like it's like, oh, can I touch your hair? Oh, I've never seen hair like yours before. Oh, look, you've got cornrows. Can I touch those? Or, oh, wow, your hair's really blonde. Can I touch it? Oh, you've got red hair. So again, it's like these little things done in public which can humiliate people or actually make them feel less than because of, or make them feel special, but in quite an embarrassing way. My two children, they have afro hair, but not. And there is no word for their hair really. It's just really tight hair. My eldest son, his hair is more afro than the youngest. The youngest is lots of really tight ringlets. Although if I told him they were ringlets, he wouldn't be quite happy because we associate ringlets with little girls. So again, it's like, how do I, as a mother of two boys or two males, two young men who look very different, deal with comments such as from a young 4-year-old child who asked me and my two boys, why are you all different colors, all different shades of chocolate? I'm milk chocolate. I'm white chocolate. My youngest son is milk chocolate, and my oldest son, well, he's a little bit more towards the darker end of chocolate. But again, this was me explaining it to a 4-year-old. The parent was absolutely so embarrassed. But if we're not having these conversations and we're choosing to be offended or humiliated, again, some of the things that people are choosing to take on as racism are really sometimes just curiosity, and it comes from uh, an unconscious level of thinking and awareness. And then we have to look at it from racism from an organizational level. Are we looking at how many people we're ticking the boxes? How are we including people just to tick boxes to say that we're not racist organization, that we do include, we are inclusive? Are we acknowledging different nationality celebrations or um, different ideas of, what health issues are going on? I have a friend who suffers from sickle cell anemia. That requires a lot of doctor visits to the doctor's surgery, and that's something that needs to be taken into consideration. It's not something that I, as a white person, would understand because it doesn't affect me. But then equally, there are other disabilities that some people have that do not affect me either. I don't know what it's like to, suffer from men's issues and, prostate cancer. Again, it's about looking at different things that affect different people and actually acknowledging them. And if we can do it for women in menopause or women in childbirth or men or dads taking time off for paternal leave, then we can absolutely do it for people of different ethnicities, cultures, and nationalities. So again, looking at it from an organizational level, there are some people who they choose not to eat certain foods or choose to drink alcohol, and the Rastafari's, they smoke cannabis, something that is inherent within their nationality, in their ethnicity, in their religious beliefs, and all of these things that coincide to actually make this person who they are. And what are the laws that are impacting them actually being free to express themselves that way? And also thinking of people as less than, oh, we've all got prejudices in them. I'm not saying I don't. When I find them, I'm like, oh, don't like that about myself. Sort yourself out, Dawn. But again, it's about looking at how we interact with people. And if we're thinking less of someone for something, catching it, go, oh, why did I think that? Is that my thought? Is that my belief? Is that my value? Or is that something that I've inherited from society or my parents? And again, it's about looking at whether we are doing it just because of the color of their skin, their cultures, their beliefs, or their abilities. So looking at what it is that we're actually talking about today. Okay, so here in Britain, one of the, sorry, my back. I went to the chiropractor a couple of days ago, and I'm still in quite a bit of pain, so you'll just have to forgive me if I make some quite random noises. Back in the or I'd say early days, but it's probably the 40s and 50s, maybe a little bit earlier as well. We had the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan of the North America, from so some people would say it's the Deep South. But we know that they weren't just in the Deep South. Their behaviors and their attitudes spread across all of North America. Whether it was the pioneers that were started to run people, the indigenous communities, off their land, or saw them as savages just because they were different. They lived in teepees, or you've got like the the slave trades that were there, and you've got the disadvantaged communities because of the white supremacy. Now, today in Britain, we have the EDL, the English Defence League, political parties such as Reform, which are espousing racism and hatred, and we're seeing that even. I mean, it's just baffling what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing, because I'm thinking, hang on a second, like, I'm 48. And this was a thing when I was a child 30 years ago. We're talking about developing IT systems, and putting people on the moon, and all of this, and yet we still cannot deal with the fact that we have all of these issues and these judgments on someone just because of the color of their skin. And we can dress it up in lots of different ways. Like Reform are really, really like, ugh, they just make my skin crawl. And they dress it up like, oh, we're going to reclaim Britain. We're going to take Britain back. We're seeing it in America. We want our country. We're going to make America great again. And it's like, yeah, but you want to get rid of the immigrants. Everybody in North America, apart from Mexico, are immigrants. Where are you all going to go? Back to Germany, back to Italy, back to Britain and Ireland and Holland, and like, you want to get rid of the immigrants. Where are you all going to go? There's a lot of you in America. There's a lot of you in Canada. And again, looking at the issues that we've got here in Britain, like, we've got too many immigrants coming, and I covered the amount of immigrants that are coming into this country and stealing all our jobs and taking all our women and all our education. Da, 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 da. Really, your ideas fall really flat. Britain would not be Britain today if we did not have the Gurkhas and the Pakistanis and the Indians coming over here to Britain to help us rebuild the country during the war. We had people coming over from Jamaica. We had people coming from all over the world to help rebuild Britain, and they did so willingly and graciously. And they did it because they knew it was the right thing, helping out somebody else. And yet here we are today with the wonderful Nigel Farage and Tommy Robinson being the really toxic individuals that they are. How wonderful. With Sir Keir Starmer joining the brigade, and quite disgusting, to be honest. But anyway, their narratives and their agendas are very dark, and they dress up racism in so many ways that you just have to sit and figure it out for a bit, because people like Keir Starmer, they really want to support the Israelis and the Zionists, but the Israelis are immigrants into Palestine, thanks to the British Empire. So if we want to get rid of immigrants, why did we put and support and help destroy a country and put other people there, but we don't want them in our country? No, absolutely we do. Like, we are all human beings. We all have a right to be here. We all have very different ways of living, and we have very different belief systems, but we're all valid individuals. There's a lot of media manipulation, and I can remember a time when there was this news story. I was at my parents' house, and I've been reading a book, trying to numb out the television, because my parents, they just have the television on, and I really can't stand it. I've not had a television in over 30 years. There were two news reports, and one was about parking tickets and how the number of parking tickets had gone up in the area, blah de blah de blah. And the very next story was about how it was all the immigrants coming to the country and, da, 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 da. And the way in which these two stories had been sewn together one after the other and how they had flowed together. This is how the inception of the ideas of racism are being implanted. It's very cleverly done. There are certain words that are being used. There are ways in which, the layering of stories and news articles, and the journalists know exactly what they're doing. I wouldn't trust Sky News if, my life depended on it. God, they're just, the fact that they're not reporting on what's really going on in Gaza right now is quite shocking. And the individuals that they're having on their news reports, again, very like how anyone can be supporting what's going on in. I know that I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, but how anyone can still be supporting the actions of the IDF, the Israeli Defense, um, what's the Israeli Defense Force, how anyone can be supporting what they're doing right now is absolutely beyond me. And if you do support the IDF or the Zionist movement, then you really should not be in my space. Because staying quiet on these issues, whether it's genocide, whether it's racism, whether it's sexism, whether it's any kind of bullying, because this is what it all comes down to. It's about bullying and preventing somebody getting to an opportunity or living life happily, successfully, healthily, and abundantly just because we don't like the look of them or just because we don't agree with a certain set of values or from where they're come. We have been fed so much fear about different countries around the world through the media. It is time to switch it off. And when you watch a movie, you can pretty much guarantee, if you look at who the baddies are or who the gangsters are or the terrorists are, you can project who is going to be the bad guys in the next one, because they're quite clever, these Hollywood folks. That they will tell you, when we saw a lot of the Irish, before what was happening in the 80s with the IRA, they were featured quite heavily in movies. Then we had the Muslims and, coming from the Arab world and the Pakistanis, and then, we had all of that issue. And then we've got the Russians, now we've got the whole thing with and we'd had Korea. The movies are quite good at telling you what's going to be happening if you look at it, rather from just, oh, it's entertainment, let me shove my mouth with popcorn. If you actually listen and see what's not presented, but you read the subtleties between it, and then you look at what's actually going on, they're very clever, these storytellers. There's some very good writing in Hollywood. Unfortunately, it's funded by some really, really gnarly individuals, but there we go. But again, what we're seeing is racism is allowed to prosper because people stay quiet. People don't want to be seen to be the one that's calling out racism. And we've actually, oh, what? So I'm racist now, am I? People don't want to have to deal with that. But the thing is, it's like, that's a bit of gaslighting going on there, and people, when you keep the peace, it is a justification for, I've written here that it's a justification for police brutality, because they want to keep the peace. And if we lock up all these coloured folks, that are coming over here and, that don't belong here because they're not white, it's quite disgusting, really. And people become a statistic. And it's like, oh, well, you're black, and I've always said to my children, not that they did go and hang out at malls or hang out in the town centre, but one of the fears I had when my children were growing up, when they started to go into town to get like their own stationery and bits and pieces, supporting my children to be able to stand on their own 2 feet, was just go and do what you've got to do and then come back. Because if anything happens in the town centre, you're Arabs, and you will be the first suspect on the police radar. And we sent our children to a school where ethnic diversity was not just within the school, but it was actually within the families of the children that attended the school. because it's all well and good having different ethnicities attend a school. But if there's a lack of diversity within the actual family, we're still not understanding the differences and the challenges that these individuals face. Now, my eldest son, going back to the little 4-year-old at the nursery school who asked us why we were all different shades of chocolate, much to the mother's embarrassment, um, you know, my eldest son being darker and more Arab looking than my youngest, I've seen the way that they're treated differently. Their names signify something very different to a lot of people. My youngest will never really get many issues in life. Um, Outward from the external forces, because his name could not be associated with the terrorists, whereas my eldest son, very beautiful name, very, very handsome, well, they're both very handsome, both very powerful names, but his name has been associated with terrorists in movies. He has the massive gorgeous hair, and again, even to the fact that his hair, how does he take care of that? What products are available? How many stylists are around that will be able to help him deal with this massive hair? Because people that do have the very tight afro hair, that they don't know how to deal with my son's hair, because it's not afro. It's almost, but it's not. And again, what are the products and why are they a lot more expensive? And why are they, see, when you're buying these products, why are they not readily available? We've only just had women's makeup um in Britain created for the darker skin tones. And it's 2025. And it baffles me that in 2025, when we can create all of these other incredible products, and we talk about ending racism, there aren't products that people need to take care of their skin or their hair or to have their makeup, and their body shapes are not acknowledged. And it's all of these subtleties within the marketplace and the retail sector that create all of these frustrations. And that is a form of racism, because it's like, well, I don't need to do, it doesn't bother me, so I don't have to deal with it. Well, actually, if you are creating a makeup range, you create a makeup range for lots of different skin tones. You're smart about it. Because if you're not including, you are excluding. I keep saying this. And the thing is, we have a lot of intelligent people that are really quite ignorant. And I even spoke to someone a couple of days ago, because we were talking about my third book, Crossing the Line, and what happened with my arrest in Scotland, and how one of the accusations that came against me, which was false, was because I brought all my Paki kids to the island. I was like, they're not Pakis, they're Arabs. And it was just, if you can't tell the difference, stop showing your ignorance. And it was just so fascinating that the insults that we got that day, when this accusation came, and even in the courtroom with some very high level judges and lawyers, highly educated, supposedly very intelligent, they did not know the difference. The judge even didn't know the difference between being in therapy and being insane, but that's a whole other series which we will come on to next year. But again, if you're intelligent and you're ignorant, is that worse than being uneducated and unaware? We can learn a lot from social media, and lots of people spend about 4 to 5 hours a day scrolling their phone, but they're not actually learning anything. Which is worse? It's a really bad situation that we're in a lot of ways. There is lots of growth and there is lots of positivity, and there has been great moves, but there is still a lot of stuff that really needs to be sorted out. Such as, I wanted to bring this here because obviously being an author and a book nerd, these figures were really quite shocking. And They do I've stated here that these have come from wordsrated.com. And there were lots of referencing to where they got their data from: the National Office of Statistics, they got it from the government websites, they got it from Authors Guild, etc. So there was a lot of referencing that obviously I couldn't put on the slide today. But 75.58%, so 76% of authors are white. That's really quite shocking. I was like, wow. And then we have 5.93% are Black or African American. And this is a phrase, African American, that I explored with Lani Mulvey, one of my authors, who curated and led the book, Standing in Strength. We had a conversation, it's on my podcast, The Truth Serum, about why she calls herself Asian American, and people say African American or Chinese American. You're all American. And she said, no, I'm really, really proud of my heritage of being Asian, and that makes me different. And I absolutely, totally get it. And I was celebrating, I'm playing devil's advocate at this point. But a lot of people in the States don't know the difference between a Caribbean American and an African American. And I do make that distinction quite clear, because yes, I know that there are a lot of people from the Caribbean that did come from Africa, but not all of them. So again, that phrase African American, you could say that the North Africans, a lot of them are Arabs. Okay, so the labels that we give each other, which one are we using? If we're going, we could go down another rabbit hole, but I'm going to try and keep on track today. I know I keep going off on little tangents, but these are all quite relevant. And then we've got 4.93% of authors are Asian. Now, when we say Asian, what do we mean by that? Are we talking, North Asian? Are we talking South Asian, East Asian, West Asian, Eurasian? Like, what do we mean by Asian? It is quite a, because some people go, well, if I'm in North America, Asian means people from China and Japan, Vietnam, Korea, that region, which in England we would call the Far East, which again is a colonial language. When we're still using colonial language, like when we talk about Eastern Europe, that is still an element of racism. And this is how it's banded, is othering of people. And othering is another word that we use because we like to make things a little bit more polished and a little bit less offensive than actually saying what's racist. And that is one of the things that we're seeing. We're seeing people change the name of things, or they're changing the word or the description of things just to make it more palatable, because people are a little bit too soft these days. But are they too soft? Really? Or are we just more aware? So how are we describing Asians? Because in Britain, an Asian is somebody who comes from, say, Pakistan or India, or Bengal. What are we classifying as Asian here? It wasn't actually mentioned. It was from the States, so I'm guessing it didn't actually state in the report that I read, that I clicked on and then clicked on and then clicked on. It didn't actually break down what they meant by Asian, but again, it's something that really needs to be addressed. And then 7.62% are Hispanic or Latino. I actually knew a guy, well, I still do know a guy who was from Venezuela, who didn't know the difference between Hispanic or Latino. And I said, well, how do you not know? You're a Latino. And when you look at the history and how Latin America was formed, and like the travelings across the world, from all the sailors and all the explorers, it's really quite important that we know about the Hispanic and Latino differences. Again, not knowing, but talking about them and saying Latinx. What is Latinx? Do the people who are Latinos, do they want to be called Latinx? Or is it, as I'm finding, there are the second and third generation of people, I don't really want to be called that, because they know it blocks them from getting opportunities. So the unconscious bias is actually infiltrating the people that it's actually there to bias, and they're buying into it. And it's crazy that they're doing this. And then we've got 5.94% are from other races or ethnicities. Now, I did include this because other races, I mean, there, like I said, there is only one race, and that is the human race. There is no like I mean, I'm not. I mean, I believe in aliens? Absolutely. You know, I'd be quite arrogant to think that we were the only beings on a planet in the huge cosmos and solar system that we live in. Um, but it's this other races or ethnicities. Like, there's no mention here about Arabs. Arabs are some of the biggest storytellers. You know, Africans are some of the biggest storytellers. You know, wallpaper. What about Aborigines? What about the indigenous community? They tell stories all the time. You know, but there's no mention of them here. And this is from a very reputable organization called Words Rated. And one of the things that have always done, especially when my children were younger, it was like, who lives in your household? You know, you get these census documents come through, and then you'd have all of the different ethnicities, but Arabs were never on there. Arabs are one of the largest ethnicities on the planet. Why did they not have their own box to be put in? So I used to draw the box and write Arab next to it, because it's important. And it's this kind of thing. If your documents or your job application forms do not have a box for certain ethnicities, then that's actually an act of racism, because it's showing that you're not including, which by default you are excluding, so you're preventing opportunities. And also, one of the things that we see is if you've got more of a Jewish name, and this is not me attacking Jews, I have a lot of Jewish friends who I love dearly, but if, and even they will tell you, if you've got a Jewish name, then they're more likely, because we've tried it. We've all sent in CVs with different names. You know, African names we've sent with Arabic names and Chinese names and Jewish names and very typically English names. And the two, even though the CVs are exactly the same, the two types of names that would come back with job offers would be the English names and the Jewish names. And if you're telling me that that's not due to racism, then I don't know what is, because the CVs were exactly the same. Go figure. Sorry, just moved. And again, when we look at our networks, one of the things that I've noticed is there are some people who I've put a distance between myself and them. They would avoid what I've put here, meaningful contact with minority groups, even though the subject that they're addressing affects everybody. They were only focused on very typically white, working to middle class backgrounds. And I could not be associated with that, because maybe it was unconscious racism, maybe it was awareness or prejudice. But when you're dealing with something that affects everybody, regardless of ethnicity, belief, or culture, or nation, then you need to make sure that you have meaningful contact. Now, I'm not saying go and find the first person of color in the room or the first person of the same color as you in the room. But meaningful contact is just, oh, hi, you stood next to them at the, you know, you're getting the Danishes and the coffee at a business networking event, or you're standing next to them in a coffee shop or the supermarket. You just start talking to them like a normal person, like anybody else, but it's avoided. And or parts of their culture or part of their historical history or their traditions are mocked. You know, and there have been some things this year that that I've been back in Britain that has made me just go, oh, you're one of those. And I know that not everybody has lived in 47 countries, and immersed in themselves in cultures and, you know, eating with the locals and like, I'm a local girl, but global. Um, and I know how blessed I am, but I also know that the sacrifices I've made to be able to go and do that, because I know the more I learn about others, the more I learn about myself. And if there's something that I learn about someone's ethnicity or culture or history or traditions or belief systems that really challenges me, I'm like, okay, why does that challenge me? Why does the way that they do that, the way that they dress, the way that they raise their children, the way that they initiate their children, or the way in which they practice daily lifestyle, why does that bother me so much? And unraveling all of that. Like my dad, I found out the other day, he eats rice now. I nearly fell off the chair. My dad has never eaten rice because it's foreign muck. But again, he me being me, I'm educating my family and I'm like saying, this is not acceptable. If you choose to not eat a certain food just because it comes from a certain culture, or you say, oh, that's disgusting, how can they do that? That again is that's offensive. And yes, taking offense to something, we choose to take offense to things, and it is a luxury to take offense, because the people of Gaza, and I'm going back to them, and people from Senegal and people from the Congo, that they don't really have the time to be offended. The Latinos that are digging up the gold from their own land to prop up the American Federal Reserve, they don't really have the time to be offended because they're too busy surviving. And again, it's about looking at how the meaningful contact we have and the remembrance of what's actually going on in the world is actually affecting everybody. Now, I want to take us back a little bit, because in Britain we have a couple of words, a couple of phrases called taking the mick and the paddy wagon. Paddy wagon. This comes from the 70s and the 80s, the paddy wagon, taking the mick much longer, when the Scots and the Irish travelled over to North America and set up home there. And taking the mick comes from, so it's reported, there might be other reasons for this. A lot of the Scottish and the Irish names start with muck, McDougall, and McCormack, just to name a couple. And so Mick was also used in the military, where people would say, "Oh, the Micks are coming," meaning the Scottish or the Irish are coming. It wasn't meant to be an offensive phrase. Um, it was quite the opposite. These were comrades, these were brothers in arms. Yeah, and they all fought side by side, and there was a huge brotherhood there. But it also comes from the jocular element, because anyone who knows the Scottish and the Irish, they don't take themselves a bit too seriously. They're always up for a good crack, as the Irish say, and they are some of the funniest people I've ever met. Apart from the police in Scotland, don't really like them very much. But I do have one or two that I like. But again, it's like, because the Scottish and the Irish were always up for a bit of cheeky banter, good humoured. They'd be what they called taking the mick. But what happened was, this then evolved into, are you taking the mick? And so people, again, evolution. It's like the word oi. Here in Britain, we don't like being addressed as oi. But where that comes from is when the British sailors went over to Brazil, and in Portuguese, oi is hello. Um, but because the British sailors looked down on the Brazilians, saw them as a bit savages, although they're really not the beautiful people. Some of them in every nationality are great, and some are not. And So when they've come back to Britain and they brought the word "oi," they've used it in a way to talk down to people who they think are less than them, whether they were the working classes, whether they were the servants in the homes or the slaves or, people on the street. They would choose to use the word "oi." So now in Britain, if we say "oi" to somebody, it's seen as very rude because of the legacy of the language. And the paddy wagon came about. Now I said, oh, the paddy wagon's coming for you. What this means is it was likely that a lot of the Irish people were the ones that were being arrested, and a paddy wagon is a police van. And especially in the 70s and 80s, with everything that was going on between Ireland, the Catholics, the Protestants, and all the way through, into the 90s. You would see a lot of people, a lot of the Irish people that were resisting occupation, they would be arrested. And so the police van became the paddy wagon. Now, some people take them as racist slurs, some of them don't, but they're against the Irish. And it's like, can we call them racist slurs if it's a white person against a white person? Well, yes, we can. Because again, racism is against a different race, but we're all the same race. So why is it called racism? Because ism is an idea. It's an idea about race. And again, like when we look at the roots of all these words and how we're using them, we kind of change how we view the world and how we see and how we speak and how we think. So, for example, I've mentioned about my mixed ethnicity family. I remember when I was first with my ex-husband, whenever we would go to a county in Britain called Leicestershire, my ex-husband was doing very well. He was a very clever, he still is, software programmer. And he did very well for himself. He had a Mercedes, very nice Mercedes. And so when we would ever drive anywhere, especially Leicester, I would time it. Okay, how long do you think it would be before the police pull us over? And it became a bit of a running joke. And I'd say to the police, is he my drug dealer or my pimp today? And they'd be like, what? I said, well, you always pull us over. And I said, today it only took you so many minutes. So which is it? Is he my drug dealer or is he my pimp? And they would be so confused because I'd confronted them with their own ignorance and prejudice that, an Arab cannot possibly be driving a Mercedes and certainly not have a white woman sat beside him. I mean, gosh, God, and this was in 1996. Can you imagine? Gosh, shock horror. And again, it's like when I was traveling with my children over into Europe, because they'd got Arabic names, I couldn't possibly be their mother because I was trafficking them. So I had to be able to produce not only their birth certificate, but also their passport until my oldest son went to look at us. We looked the same because we do. There are a lot of familiar similarities. The only difference is he's male and he's of a different color. Where does all this come from? Because if you're working in a job such as border enforcement, or you're in the police, or you have been maybe in the military, your environment will shape how you view people from different countries. So if you're I was talking with one of my authors, Jake, about this when we wrote his book, The Recipe, which is about a US Marine's mindset for success. We were talking about the perceptions that people have. I said, like we hear the phrase cloth head. He was like, yeah, we would never do that. Like, that's not the military. That's not what he knew. That's not what Arabs were called. They were, and a lot of the times they were going to protect what was happening. They weren't just there to go and bomb and do friendly fire. So again, it was about looking at the terminology that we see on the news, or we see in our newspaper headlines, or on the radio, or where people are picking up, because even if we do not read the rag newspapers or the TV, watch the TV, the people around us, whether they're on the bus, in a cafe, in a hotel networking event, we still have that floating around us. We can reduce it as much as we want, but unless you do what I did and go and live in a jungle, or go and live out in the ocean, you're not really, you're not going to get rid of it. It's still going to be there, and it's about us challenging these kind of attitudes that we see and these things that we hear. Um, if you're in the police force, a friend of mine, Emily, went into the police force, and it's something she always wanted to do, um, ever since I'd known her. And she finally got in. And within a few years of being a police officer, she was like, just can't. I'm just like the things I hear and sorry, and the things I see. Um, it was distressing for her. She goes, and she felt that she didn't know who she was anymore because there was so much racism within the police force. And if she spoke up against it, then she was ostracized from her fellow police officers. And it was like, what are you, white or black, or are you blue? Very American. And it's, again, that has transferred over to Britain within the police force. I know a lot of really great police officers, and I know they're not all racist, and I know that, they will treat everybody with the utmost respect. But again, if you're in that environment, or if you're living in a very white monocultural area or a very black monocultural area, then views of the people in your area, whether it's at the local shop, local takeaway, restaurants, you're going to be hearing it, and it's up to you to choose to challenge it, or move away from it. Um, the other thing that I wanted to mention here is when I had my very first company, we hired a woman who had been at, we did something which is about people returning to work and helping them to get back into work, and rehabilitating them, retraining them, etc. And there was one young woman who came to work for us. I was managing director, and I asked her to do something, and she ignored me. I was, excuse me, I just asked you to do that. She goes, I don't work for white people. And I was like, sorry? I was really quite, I was like, well, you do, you work for me. I'm the manager. She goes, I don't work for you. She goes, I work for him. And she pointed to my ex-husband. He was my husband at the time. I said, well, him has a name, and he is also a director of the company. You're fired. We don't allow that kind of attitude and behavior within this kind of company. Now, I could have educated her. I mean, I did say to her, if you're so proud to be black, why do you straighten your hair? And, because she'd gone about what music she does not listen to. And I also asked her, if you really do not like working for white people, why did you accept this job? Why do you live here in this country? If you want to do, and it was like I was really challenging her, and I'm asking her questions which I knew would really get and some of the questions I asked I wasn't proud of. And some of the questions I asked on purpose in a way that actually reversed the racism that she was throwing back at me, for her to actually think about what she was saying. So it is there. I've had people not want to work with me as a publisher or be included within one of my anthologies because I'm white. And then for me, that is like, just, your stories are important, and it doesn't matter whether I'm white and you're black, or you're Arab, or you're Chinese, or you're Indian. We've all got this mission that we're working towards. We all want to achieve these goals. Let's work together. But they just didn't want to work with me. I wasn't even there was a podcast I applied for. I can't have you on here. I don't interview white people. And I was like, wow, imagine if I had said that. I don't interview black people. I don't interview Chinese people. My company would have probably been destroyed. And again, we're looking at, all of these statistics that say that when, the ones I shared before, or when we're looking at criminal statistics, we're looking at statistics that are not really accurate. I shared last week Oh, I shared last week about how like the immigration figures and what was migration, why people migrated from one place to another, and looked at, the amount of immigrants that were coming over from Ukraine. I think that was like 3 weeks ago, as opposed to those that were coming over from, Europe, and looking at the differences in there. And again, how are we looking at the statistics? If we say, oh, well, it's got to have been that young black guy down the road, or it had to have been that young Asian, or it had to have been that Arab, because statistically speaking, it had to be them. And one of the things that really bothers me is on the news reporting, because whenever something bad happens, and if it's a white person, it's never their skin color, and it's never their it's never their nation or their religion that's ever they're just named. It was Christopher Biggins. Sorry, Christopher Biggins, if you're watching this. Just first name I came up with, Christopher, and you were the only one I could remember the surname. But again, if it was, it would never have been white Christian man commits fraud, or commits murder, or rapes a young woman. Really, I'm sorry, Christopher Biggins. But when it's somebody who is black or Chinese or Arab or Asian, sorry, not Asian, Chinese is Asian. Again, do you see, even I fall into some of these traps. But whenever it's somebody who is not white, it's always black Muslim, or black man, or Arab, or Pakistani. They did it because it's their faith or their skin color that made them do it, right? He didn't hear anything about Timothy McVeigh blowing up loads of people, being white and Christian. But if you're black, or you're Arab, or you're Muslim, it's all to do with your skin color. Your skin color made you do it. Just following orders, right? And again, like I said, for us to get to the bottom of this, and for us to eradicate this, and is it actually ever going to go away? Because if we don't do something, and we don't speak up about it, and we don't have the challenging conversations, and we don't actually check ourselves, and we don't go, actually, my network and my family and my friendship group, they're quite homogenized. I'm not saying go out and seek, people just because of the skin color. That's no different than choosing somebody who, for a job, who happens to be, Chinese, transgender, and gay. Oh, we've got one person, we can tick 3 boxes. I'm not saying go and do that, because then that's not solving the problem. That's not solving the attitudes and the ideas. But again, it's like, what awareness do you have about your own network and your own ideas, and your belief systems, and how do you include people into your life? Like I said, meaningful connections. I remember several years ago, I went to a friend's wedding. I was the only white woman. I was the only white person in this whole wedding. And I walked in with my now ex-husband, who's an Arab. We were the only mixed ethnicity family, or couple. Everybody else was black. We all had a great time, but it was really surprising for me that in Britain, in the early 2000s, that was still a thing. It was like, oh wow, I've never been, never been in a place that's just so homogenized. Um, it was really shocking. I mean, I'd left an area of the country that was very homogenized. Now I am walking into a friend's wedding, again, very homogenized. Like breeds like, environment is everything. And you've got to be willing to challenge your own prejudices and those of others, and you've got to be willing to understand why your environment is so homogenized, and why you are choosing that. Is it your comfort zone that needs stepping out, and that you need to step out of? What is it that's stopping you from having an integrated, not an assimilated, but an integrated community, whether that is your neighborhood, whether that is your company, whether it's your church group, whether it's your mosque, um, whatever it is. Why is your community at work or home, or social, why is it so homogenized? And why do you not speak up about certain things that you're seeing? Is it because you don't want the hassle? Keep the peace, but it's actually propagating things which doesn't actually keep the peace. Um, your friendship group and your network will tell you a lot more than you realize. And as I always say, the more you know about others, the more you know about yourself. Don't be afraid to speak up and call yourself out on your prejudices, because it's a really great thing to do. It could be really challenging, and you may not like what you find out about yourself, but you get the opportunity to return it back to where it came from. You get the opportunity to go, okay, so that has been part of my psyche up until now, but now I get to choose to let it go. This is not who I choose to be. This is not what I want for myself and my family moving forward. I let it go. I return to sender. Return to sender is really, really powerful. Remember, you do know, because soul always knows whether you're racist or secretly prejudiced or openly. And please do not become a Tommy Robinson and allow political parties like Reform to blind you into thinking that it's, it's for the greater good of making Britain great again. Really, I'm not. But again, choose wisely who you surround yourself with, and choose joy, not just for you, but for everybody. And do choose you, because you are important. And so that is me wrapping up today. I know that I've gone on, but I could go on about this subject forever and a day. Um, and I just need to just share it. If you do want to learn more about me, and you want to learn more about the activism that I do, I call it intelligent activism, because we do, um, writing a book really does call you out on your on your bullshit, because you really get present. Because when you're writing a book and you write something down and you go, oh, but if I think that about that situation, then I must, that if I transfer that logic to a different situation, then that doesn't meet. And you have to really kind of figure that out. Now, we're going through some changes here at Dawn Bates International. We've got the DBI publishing, that's all been rebranded. So all our books are being updated at the moment. And we've got some really exciting book bundles, reader experiences coming for you soon. And so I just want to highlight some of the books that we've got on offer. Look at all those lovely books. And I'm really, really proud of the work, the body of work that we're creating, and that we've created together. This page is being sorted out. As you see, we've made a start. But again, if you want to buy any of these books in bulk, for Christmas presents, or, the holidays coming up, you want to get away, then do let me know. I can do you some bulk orders. If you want me to speak on any of the subjects that if there's anything that you've heard in this series that you would like me to speak about at an event, or you'd like me to come along to your local library or to your university and speak to an audience, then do let me know. You can go to dawnbates.com keynote speaker and just have a that was a bit of a one. Just fill in this form, let me know whether it's a keynote speech, a workshop, guest lecture, a panel, what your budget and your inquiry is, and so that we can actually make sure that we give you the very best service possible. I'm going to, and if you do want to book me for, bear me a second, I don't know what I just did. We had this issue earlier. If you do want to book a session with me and you do want to discuss what it's like, challenging some of your beliefs and your views, and looking at the narratives that are going on in your head, so that we can help you change some of the values, as I said, and the beliefs and that you've got the vocabulary, then do book in a narrative coaching session with me. They are about 45 minutes long, and we will go quite deep within those 45 minutes. There are only a couple of sessions available today, but you can go through a few of these dates, and we've got a few tomorrow. Next week we've got a few more. There's only 2 on Monday, and then we're into October. There's a few on Thursday afternoon next week. I don't know why that is happening, because at 2 p.m. it's my next weekly moment. So that needs to be updated. But thank you so much for joining us today. I do hope that you've enjoyed it. And if you've got any questions, do let me know. Again, do book in to speak to me or have me speak, and then I'll come along and do the very best that I possibly can for you, and update my own website, because it's now 47 countries, not 44. Getting there. But thank you for joining me today, whether it's live or on the replay, and I will see you next week for week 11 of this 20-week series. Thank you so much. Ciao for now. Bye bye.